Hello, and welcome to another episode of Let's Argue About Plants, the podcast for people who love plants.
But not always the same ones. I'm Carol Collins. I'm associate editor at Fine Gardening Magazine.
And I'm Danielle Sherry. I'm the executive editor here at FG. And today, Carol, we were saying we're kind of excited about this topic because it's not to come across negative, but it's plants we should like, but we just don't. I'm sorry, we just don't.
And I know. We're not mean girls or anything.
No, we're not. But although I did really like that. I get to rip on a few plants that I like. And, I feel like here on the podcast, we talk so much about great plants that are really, really awesome. And I feel like, as gardeners, we all have those plants that, we've given it our all. We've really tried with these plants, but these plants have let us down for one reason or another. Now, in my case, a lot of times it's operator error, that it's my fault that these plants just are not on my love list because, I didn't speak their love language and they decided to break up with me, as well they probably should have, because I'm the one to blame. It's not them, it's me. But I want to love them. Everybody else seems to love these plants, but I just don't. What about you? Are there plants that you think it's your operator error, or did you just tear into plants that you're like, this is a crappy plant?
It's some of each, but okay. Like my first one is I just have a terrible prejudice against this plant. It is no fault of the plant.
Okay, so you queued that up. We got to talk about it. So what plant do you have a horrible prejudice against?
Okay. It's Aurea catalpa. That's a Catalpa bignanoides, or Aurea, and that's a southern catalpa. And it's a great plant. People love it. It's hardy zones 5 to 9. It gets like 20 to 30 feet tall and 15 to 20 feet wide. But a lot of people treat it as a cutback and keep it sort of pollarded or coppiced so that it doesn't get too big. Because let's face it, most of us cannot have a 20 or 30 foot tree just anywhere in our garden, right?
True.
And it's native. What's not to like about that? Native to the southeastern United States. And the flowers are described by some as ravishing. They're like orchid-like, beautiful, big. Ravishing. They're white and frilly, and they have like streaks of purple and yellow in them. And they're gorgeous, right? But some idiot planted northern catalpa like 15 feet from my deck and home. Okay. And this sucker is, my husband has a fancy laser measurer. Its tallest branch is 80 feet off the ground. And it doesn't grow straight, and the wood is not strong, and it drops branches, and those ravishing flowers, which it is covered with in like mid-spring, they look beautiful on the tree, and then they float down and they cover every horizontal surface in my entire landscape, including the deck, including the patio, and it's fine if it's dry out, but if it's wet, they get plastered down like bird poop. It's just awful.
Oh my gosh, I'm picturing like worst case scenario, like a saucer magnolia, like just dropping those blossoms and becoming a slimy slip and slide.
Such a mess, right? And then when it's done with the flowers, it has these like little green bean like seed pods, and it starts dropping those almost immediately and continues throughout the season. And then like about the time the frost hits, it doesn't really have like attractive fall foliage, but when the frost hits it, it turns brown and all the leaves fall off at once, and they're big and they're leathery and also cover everything. And I will, as good as this Aurea catalpa is, I will never, ever, ever plant a catalpa on purpose.
Well, so it sounds like its big faults are it's messy, and it seems like it's messy basically in all seasons, because even in winter, you're saying its branches aren't super strong. So I'm assuming if we get any sort of, heavy snowstorm and ice storm, which, hi folks, we live in New England, so that happens on a regular basis. So it probably drops branches too. So that's every season it is dropping something onto your porch and patio.
Yes,
Uh,
yes. And if you get a windstorm, like some of those seed pods, mature seed pods, hang on until like a winter windstorm, and then they blow like a quarter mile away, and you get seedlings absolutely everywhere. Yeah.
yeah,
And
no,
I saw my neighbor like lovingly move one of those seedlings up next to his deck, and I'm like, oh man, I should tell him.
don't do it, buddy. Don't do it. Do you think that your opinion of this plant would change if, say, you had gotten it as like a whip or a seedling and you had maintained it as a cutback shrub, basically?
Yes. I
Okay.
mean, it's great if it's kept small,
Okay.
but once it starts to, get up above head height, it's going to be really hard to contain its exuberance. They are really fast growers. A woodpecker attacked like an old trunk of our tree, and around that woodpecker hole, a whole bunch of new water sprouts came out. I mean, it just loves to grow. It's a good grower. I will say that for it.
And it kind of sounds a little bit bomb proof too. I mean, we might be left with cockroaches, Twinkies, and catalpas if we ever have the apocalypse. Like that, a woodpecker attacked it and it decided that it was going to sprout out the woodpecker hole. That's pretty
Right?
funny.
Crazy. I think if we cut this giant thing down to the ground, it would regrow from the base. Yeah, they're
Oh.
very, very vigorous.
Okay. Well, so, all right. I feel like, because I'm like Pollyanna over here, we got to find like some good things about these plants that we just don't particularly love. So, a good thing would be if you're looking for a fast growing tree in an area that is not next to your home or porch or patio, this might be a good one. And
Yes.
also, if you're looking for a woodpecker proof tree, this would be a good one, right?
Yes, the cultivar Aurea has these gorgeous yellow golden leaves too, and that's a selling point. And that I think for people would make it worth growing a catalpa.
Mm-hmm.
Just not me. I'm too scared. I'm scared of them. I'm afraid I'm going to let it go.
Oh my goodness. I love it. I love it. I love the fact that you went out there and with your husband's like laser level, you basically measured how tall this thing was.
We
That's
were
great.
curious. One of the branches had come down, and like once it's on the ground, you can measure. And we said, "Well, how long must the one up there be?"
Wow.
We have scientific data.
That's crazy. Well, I mean, like that points towards we always, we proselytize about this, but right plant in the right place, right? So this might be the right plant, but it's not in the right place. So that's poor Catalpa. All right, Catalpa, you're making the list. You're making the list. I'm gonna get so much hate mail with my first plant, Carol. I'm so scared to even say this, but I don't love Peachie's pick, Stokes aster, Stokesia laevis, Peachie's pick, zones 5 to 9. Again, this is another southeastern native plant, so I feel like we're really picking on the southeast today. But 1.5 feet tall and wide, full sun, moist, well drained soil. This plant has never looked good for me. Just never. Absolutely never. I looked to it to be after that my cat mint kind of goes by, that hit of purple with softer kind of, billowing foliage. I thought, all right, so a good thing to mix in there would be this Peachie's pick Stokes aster. Don't think that it's got a peach flower. It does not. It's actually named after the person who discovered the plant, whose first name was Peachie Saxon. The flowers are purple. So I thought, oh, great intentions, right? I'm going to replace with a midsummer bloomer to replace my catmint and give me that hit of color. I'm going to do this. This plant sucks. It's just never performed right. So you get this basal rosette of foliage, and then the stems kind of shoot out of the top of it with these half dollar, size pincushion lavender flowers. But it's said to be drought tolerant. Everywhere you read about it, it says drought tolerant, drought tolerant. Now, I have very droughty conditions. I have lean, well-drained soil, and this is a full sun spot. But every single gosh darn year, these leaves curl up, they yellow, part of it browns out in the center. It's just a super unattractive plant overall, just super, super unattractive. And yes, then by mid-July, the flowers come out. So it's like, if it was just being ugly over on the side and it was like, oh, pay no attention to me, no big deal here, move along. But no, then the flowers come out and the flowers are beautiful. So then you walk up to the plant and you're like, what a beautiful, oh God. And it's just ugly. The foliage is just ugly. And then here's the thing about the flowers. Oh, so pretty. All right, I'll just look at the top. But 2 seconds later, they brown out and they end up looking like a brown, thistly, kind of ugly looking flower that persists and stays on top. Okay, what the heck? I want to leave the flowers in place too because they've got little seeds and the goldfinches love them and hooray. But really, it's just uggo. I think it's, again, right plant, wrong place. Like, I took it on face value that this is a drought tolerant plant that I put in an area that I'm not going to regularly irrigate. I have, they got it established 2 to 3 years, and now it's just not my jam. It just is not my jam. I'm not pleased. And it's to the point where I am a sucker for, like a bad book. I'll continue reading, even though it's a bad book, because I'm like, I'm going to finish this. I'm like that with plants. I just hold on to them. I'm like, oh, it's still alive. It's still limping along. Keep it. Peachie's picks, they're coming out of my garden this year. I'm done with them. I'm breaking up with them. It's time. It's definitely time.
You go. Liberate yourself.
Right? Have you ever grown this plant?
I haven't.
Okay.
I haven't grown it, and I think it may be because, like, when I'm shopping for plants, that's not the season I'm generally shopping for. Yeah, but it looks good in pictures, and maybe from a distance, right. And maybe Photoshop is involved in making it look good. I don't know. But,
it's a Monet. Yeah. It looks good from afar, but you get up on top of it, it's just a hot mess express. All right, so we took a little break for a second there because it's very hot today while we're taping. But in the interim, Carol, you said, oh, you want to hear some hate mail? I'm going to get some. All right, tell me, what is the hate mail plant on your list next?
Oh, hostas. Oh. Everyone loves hostas. Oh, everyone except me.
Like, in general, like, you're going there? You're going for the whole hosta genus?
Okay. Little blue mouse ears or whatever. That one's cute. No, I get why people love hostas. I do. I get it. Hardy, right? Hardy zones 3 to 8. Almost everyone can grow them. Mm-hmm. 2 inches tall is the smallest one. 6 feet tall and wide is the biggest one. Oh, so cool. They love evenly moist, humus-rich soil. I got one of the two. Not evenly moist. Not willing to water. So, okay, that's strike one for you, hostas. Partial shade to full shade. Yes, so useful. And some of them can take some sun. Mm-hmm. So quite adaptable. What's not to love? I just don't love them. And I think the reason is that A, because I don't have the right conditions, and B, because the deer will not leave them alone. And if it's not the deer, it's the slugs. If it's not the slugs, it's the rabbits. And the effort involved in protecting these just never, ever felt like I'm willing to give it what it needs. So ironically, but right after I was just back from my last work trip, and I literally just put my clothes in the wash, unpacking, and my neighbor calls, and she's the sweetest, dearest gardener in the whole world. She's been gardening in this neighborhood since 1984. Wow. I love her. We often will stop and talk when I'm out in the garden. And she said, I have some hostas. Would you like them? We're tearing them out. And her husband never liked them. And I just couldn't say no.
Oh, no.
And I ended up with 110 hostas.
Carol! Oh, my goodness, Carol. No, you have to say no. You have to politely decline. What are you doing?
I know. My husband was like laughing at me. He's like, you can't say no to free hostas.
You can't
Gardeners
say no
can't
to
say, not even you,
free
because he knows
plants.
my feelings. Yeah, I said yes to be polite. And because she was so concerned, like she just wanted these hostas to go to a good home. And I did pawn some off on another neighbor, but what I ended up with was 110 hostas. And I, put them in the ground. I had this like brief window between my work trip and family vacation. I got them all in the ground. We actually got some rain. I was like, yay. Literally overnight, the deer arrived and ate the tops off every last one of them, every one of them. And I was just like, oh, no rest for the wicked. And now I'm going to have to find some deer spray or something. I don't know. I have heard that if you mix eggs into water and spray it on the leaves or water the plant with it, that helps. And like it's scientifically backed up.
Okay, like the sulfur component or something? Because I feel like a lot of like the deer sprays do rely upon like a sulfur component to it as well. Oh my gosh. Carol, I thought that you were going to tell me that you accepted them and then planted them in an area as like, how like, certain people will say, all right, I put salt licks out in the back 40 of the property so that attracts the deer and they all go there and then they'll leave the garden alone. I have problems with that whole theory of that working, but I was thinking that you were going to like say, okay, so in the very far corner, that corner you talk about where like people hop the fence and kind of like run over the edge of your property. I was thinking you're going to put them there. It's going to be a sacrificial garden where you put them there. And when they get run over by cars and eaten by deer, you can just tell your neighbor, like, I don't know. I just don't know. It just happened.
I put some of them out by the road, and now she walks. Her daily walk includes a little visual peek into our garden, and so she's seen the whole thing go down. And I feel really bad, but I told her, I was like, I don't grow hostas because of the deer, and she was warned. I told her I would try to protect them, but I don't know.
So here's what I'm thinking too, because hostas are one of those plants, just the straight green. Sometimes people just call it like straight August lily, plantain lily. That is just a straight green hosta that I feel like every plant sale in every town across America generally has a plethora of. Is it those, or did she gift you with like some cool ones that have neat variegation and gold and green and white?
We have some of this sort of straight species. Mm-hmm. We have some that are a little bit gold, but they're not like the modern golden hostas. And then quite a few variegated.
Okay.
And I don't have the names of any of them. I'm not sure if she ever knew the names of any of them, but quite a mix. Some of them very big old plants. Now, there were some hostas growing on this property when we bought it. And they were bulletproof. Every year they'd come up. Every year the deer would eat them to the ground. And that happened for like about 10 years. So I don't think these hostas I planted are gone for good. But if I want any leaves, I am going to have to do something about deer protection.
Oh my goodness. So I have a very healthy deer population. We live in the middle of the woods. And I do have hostas, but I am convinced that because of the barriers that there are to the hostas, one area that I have hostas that have maintained and been fine and not browsed, knock on wood, is because it's, kind of in this isolated pocket corner of, my very small shade garden section. So it's, on one side is the house, on another side is a propane tank, on the third side is our deck. So, it's very limited. And then there's shrubbery in front of it. So I feel like it kind of is almost hidden or protected, or maybe my deer just aren't that bright. I don't know, but that has worked a bit, to kind of nestle them into these little like pocket areas. But you're not going to do that with 110. You'd be at it for years. Oh, all right. Well, hostas, you're going on the list. You're going on the list. Well,
Bring on the hate mail.
Yep, bring it on. Bring it on. All right, so here we're gonna go here now. I'm gonna get more hate mail. I'm gonna go with daylilies. Now here's the thing. I think as a sample plant years ago had gotten Persian Ruby daylily, and I made an exception because I'm born in July. I love rubies. That's my birthstone. I'm not really a big red person ordinarily, but I just thought, oh, this is such a great plant, and it blooms in July. How great is that? So I bit the bullet, zones 3 to 9. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go for this daylily. And I don't know why I don't like daylilies, but I think I equate it to much like the straight species hosta. It's so ubiquitous. It was every big box store in 1991 and 2 planted 8 million happy returns and Stelladora daylilies. And it just ruined me on daylilies for the rest of my life because I just think of them as this, bomb-proof awful plant that grows in parking lots of big box stores. But, that's on me because that's an attribute that we always look for in a plant, right? Something that doesn't take a lot of maintenance, that is, can take anything and it still survives. But for some reason, I think of that as a bad thing with daylilies. But anywho, so back to this Persian Ruby. Gave it a whirl. I threw it up on Hospital Hill. I did not water it. I did not care for it. In fact, most of that area has been taken over by sassafras seedlings that have kind of seeded their way in. And every July I look out there and go, would you look at that? There's the Persian Ruby blooming away. You can't see it anymore because that green strappy foliage is taken over by sassafras, but it's still doing its thing. And I'm like, I wish it would just die already. I just don't.
It'll never die.
It will never die. It's so tough. It's so tough because it does. It's in the perfect conditions for it, right? It's full sun. It's well-drained soil. It's lean soil. It loves those conditions. Hospital Hill at my house is kind of like a Home Depot parking lot. I mean, it is basically the equivalent. But I am not a daylily person. And I got to throw it out to my father came to visit a couple of weeks ago, and he's an avid gardener. He was walking around my gardens, critiquing as parents often do. And he is a daylily connoisseur. He has every daylily known to man, and all of them are labeled in his garden. And he looked at me about halfway through the tour and he goes, "You don't have a single daylily in your garden?" And I said, "Oh, no, I do." And so I took him up to Hospital Hill and he goes, "This is sad. This is just sad. You have to get this poor daylily out of these conditions." And I'm like, "Nope, it's fine. It's good there. It's good." So yeah, not a fan, I'm going to say. Persian Ruby daylily, I mean, if there was going to be a daylily I liked, that would be it. But I just don't like daylilies. Just can't do it.
Yeah, and deer love them too.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Hostas and daylilies. Bring on the hate mail. All right, Carol. So what's next on the plants we should love, but we just don't?
So I'm actually going to put a little twist on it because this is a plant I love. I loved the idea of it. I put it in the wrong place. So I did not love what I did with this plant. And,
so it's operator error. You're fessing up.
Oh yeah, for sure. Big operator error on this one. So it's Rattlesnake Master, which is such a fantastic common name. Eryngium yuccifolium, hardy zones 3 to 9. Oh my gosh, like this one is really widespread. Native plant, primarily to tall grass prairies, but also open woodlands and sort of habitats like that. It needs full sun. It likes average to dry, well-drained soil. It's very adaptable for like sandy, clay, gravelly, even alkaline soil. It does fine in shallow, rocky soils. I honestly think that might be what it prefers. Very drought tolerant, but you absolutely have to have the good drainage because it can't stand to be wet. That's the one thing it can't take. And pest resistant, nothing eats it except pollinators love it. unpalatable to deer and other herbivores.
Unlike our previous two plants on our
Yep,
list.
right. So, okay, fantastic, beautiful in its own weird way. Nothing looks like Rattlesnake Master. It has a rosette, basal rosette of bluish sword-shaped foliage, and that's where it gets its species name from, yuccafolium. They look a lot like yucca leaves.
Mm-hmm.
And then these tall branched stems, and at the end of the stems are these prickly, greenish, grayish white flowers. And I had a neighbor looking at them, and she's like, "Is that all it does?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's all it does." Like, there's not going to be another color. Like, this is the flower. But cool looking. And I got one of those mixed plug trays from Prairie Moon Nursery. Does native plants, and you can get 7 or 8 of each kind in a mixed tray. So I think I got 8 of these, and I put them next to my walkway, my front walkway. How's this going to turn out, Carol? I did not anticipate being attacked by long, prickly flower stems every time I walked out of the house, but that's what happened. They flop. If they don't have something to help them stand up, because in nature they would be growing in a matrix of other plants, and they would be close enough to each other that the flower heads would help hold each other up. And frankly, nature doesn't care if flower heads fall down on the ground. The bees will still come and go. They'll still make seeds. And this one is kind of a self-seeder. So I quickly realized my mistake, and I moved all of the 8 plants out of that bed next to my walkway. And I moved them over onto, more of a gravelly section of garden that was very well drained. And I thought, okay, even if they fall down, they'll be fine over there. And they were, but one of the seedlings came up next to my walk. So that was my Instagram post yesterday. The day before the taping, not the day before this will air, but I showed, this is what happens when you plant this next to the walkway.
Now I gotta ask, because Euryngum usually has a pretty significant taproot. So did the transplanting go okay because you caught them early enough? And realized your error?
That's a really good question. I was very nervous to transplant them because I'd heard about this taproot, but what I found is it was more like a cluster of fleshy roots, and if I could get under them and lift it up, they moved just fine, and they really didn't get transplant shock. I was surprised because I really was expecting more like, a long taproot, like a thistly kind of thing or something like that, but it wasn't like that. And it seemed like quite a lot of energy stored in those roots, and so moving was less traumatic for them than I would have thought. But here's something I did that makes me like this plant better. So in that dry spot that I moved them to, and they really haven't flopped yet, and we've had a very dry summer, and that may be part of the equation, but I put a few other annuals that can also take the dry. So I've got it in with the Verbena bonariensis. I have Tithonia, Mexican sunflower, Tithonia rotundifolia, and I have zinnias.
Oh, nice.
Right. So I've got some color, and I have little friends that everybody helps everybody else stand up. And this year I like it.
That's awesome. That's a great, what a beautiful mix that is that you were describing. The Mexican sunflower, the tall verbena, get that Rattlesnake Master Euryngum in there. That's such a beauty. And then zinnias in the mix. I'm just picturing that as the perfect bouquet, of that mid to late summer cut flower. Cause so behind you, for those who want to watch the video instead of listening to us strictly on your podcast network, you can actually watch a video of us doing this. We do tape every single one of these and throw them up on finegardening.com and YouTube, but Carol behind her has this Rattlesnake Master as a beautiful cut flower in a vase right now, and it is super attractive.
They hold really well in a vase, and it acts like a structure that you can put other flowers into, right? It's kind of like, a matrix.
It gives you that scaffolding almost.
Yes, that's it.
That's amazing. Yeah, I like it. All right. So we won't put that on the bad guy list. We'll just put Rattlesnake Master is in, you got to make sure that you site that plant correctly, because it can be deadly if you put it by a frequently traveled area.
At least annoying.
Right. Well, I'm on the fence, but no, I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to trash another plant. I want to love this plant. I want it to look like it does in all the catalogs and in all the pictures that I've seen. But I'm going to say that even when I've seen this in ideal conditions in a gorgeous botanical garden, who, they're basically primping and preening every single plant every single day, Veronica still looks like garbage. And Veronica spicata and its cultivars never looks good. I am sorry. It just does not. And maybe here's the thing, because it is a plant that needs full sun, rich, moist, well-drained soil. And who has that? Like, normal people do not have that. And even in a botanical garden setting where they, try to manufacture that, Veronica still doesn't look well. Now, this goes by 8 million different names. Speedwell is, a lot of people know it by, but the various spicatas that species are 1 to 2 feet tall and wide. Again, basal rosette kind of a foliage with these long green lance-like leaves to it. And then in, early to midsummer throws up spikes of blue or pink or white flowers that are, fairly decent sized. They can be anywhere from like 3 to 4 inches long. I think of it as the less tough, Veronica's as the less tough, more problematic salvia, So if you want that look, just plant a salvia, because Veronica ain't it, or at least not for this girl. Voles eat them. 4-line bugs are super problematic for the foliage, and I have seen 4-line bugs attack Veronica foliage from Chicago to the Pacific Northwest to my own Connecticut garden. And what that ends up doing is all of those beautiful, basal rosette of foliage, it ends up looking like somebody shot it with a teeny tiny, like 22 shotgun, and all these like pinprick brown scatter shot around all of the foliage, and they get heavily damaged by the 4-line bug. Now, if I were to say one good thing about Veronica is, despite every single year suffering this damage, it will come back. But here's the other bummer thing about Veronica spicata, in my experience. It's that the first year it looks great. And then we go through a winter. And even if it's in well-drained soil, it comes back about half as good the next year. And then by year 3, you're literally sitting there trying to baby 3 gosh darn stems that are the most pathetic looking plant on the face of the planet. And you're like, come on, you can do it. And it just doesn't. Because it's prone to frost heave, much like heucheras are, but it doesn't bounce back as well if you can like shove it quickly back into the ground, which is what I do with my heucheras. So I wish I could grow this plant. I really want to like this plant, but I can't grow it. It seems like nobody that I've ever come across can grow this plant very well. Now, I will be open to letters that if somebody wants to show me a real life Veronica, non-Photoshop, that looks great in their garden, to go for it. I did want to add just a little caveat that there's a different genus called Veronicastrum, which I think is a dynamic, amazing plant, a much stronger performing plant that kind of still gives you that Veronica look, those long kind of spikes of flowers, generally in the pink to light purple phase. There's a cultivar called Fascination that is just a brilliant plant, very big, gorgeous, prairie-ish looking appearance to it. That's a great plant. Veronica spicata, not so much. Not a fan. Not at all. All right, Carol, final plant that, you want to love, but you just don't.
Okay. And it's a native plant. So again, with the hate mail, I'm sorry, but wild bergamot, Monarda fistulosa. Okay. Very hardy, zones 3 to 8, grows 3 to 4 feet tall, about 3 feet wide. It likes full sun. It likes well-drained soil. It can be pretty drought tolerant. It's native to most of North America, except for Florida, California, a few Canadian provinces, but otherwise native to everywhere. Awesome. It's pollinator friendly. Deer completely leave it alone. Lots of selling points. I find it to be structurally unsound in every condition. It's tall, but it starts branching about 2-3 feet up. And it's just a recipe for flopping. And it doesn't matter what it's next to. It doesn't matter if it has, full sun. This stuff, it's lying down every time I see it. I don't know. I have tried to root this out of my garden, just get rid of it, and it keeps coming back.
I thought you started out so diplomatic. It is structurally unsound. I mean, that was a very diplomatic way to put it. But now we've gotten to the point where you're like, I am ripping this out by the
floppy
fistfuls.
McFlopperson. It's gotta go. It's pretty. It looks good from a distance. I just don't have enough. I can't get far enough away from it on my tiny property for it to look good.
Oh my goodness.
And it spreads by these like shallow rhizomes too, which I think contributes to its floppiness because its roots are really not helping it stand up either. And I wonder if it might be a good candidate for the Chelsea chop, but frankly, I just can't be bothered.
Yeah.
I don't know.
If it's going to need all that babying in order to look, somewhat decent. Yeah, that's tough. I agree with you. I've never seen that plant look good except for when seeing it in the wild, almost in this, prairie matrix where, there's a lot of ornamental grasses mixed in with it and, some, native Job highweed or something along those lines where it's, it's in the mix basically. So that's not, and a lot of us don't have gardens that are kind of situated or designed in that, outlook. So how are you going to do that? Yeah. I agree. So cool though, that when you get up on those blossoms that they almost have the spots on each one of the petals, a very intricate look to the blossom, but yeah, not so much, huh?
Pretty, but not worth it.
Yeah, I gotcha. Does it get powdery mildew though, like a lot of Monardas, or no?
Some years it has for me,
okay.
But not every year. This year again, it's been very dry, so it hasn't seemed to get it. And until we got the most recent rain, I think it had been 6 weeks since we had real rain, and we got a big rain, and it was standing up until then, rained on,
flat
down on the ground. Yeah.
Well, hey, I mean, it's a great plant, and you just say it's a great plant. It's a great plant in the wild. It's a great plant in the wild. That's where it should be.
Put it in your meadow planting. Fabulous. Yeah.
Perfect. I love it. All right. Well, so my last plant kind of falls into that same category as the daylily, the hemicrallis that I had talked about before. It's a genus that I think of that just got a bad rap because it became so ubiquitous, in the late 80s, early 90s when it was just everywhere. And that's blue rug juniper. It's Juniperus horizontalis, Wiltonii, zones 3 to 9. And listen, I feel like, Carol, you need to defend me because every year I say that fine gardening, and I pitch this idea every year that fine gardening should do a junipers that are cool article, basically, to get people out of that box of thinking every juniper looks like blue rug juniper. And I think blue rug juniper ruined it for all junipers. It was just, It was that one that everyone saw, along with the Stelladora daylilies and every single commercial landscape planting. It gets 3 to 6 inches tall, 6 to 8 feet wide. We're talking big time erosion control shrub. That is a conifer, so it keeps that, blue-green needly foliage year round. It's not a home garden friendly plant unless you're using it in, more of a commercial setting, I think. I love a juniper. I have Dobbs frosted juniper. I have several white variegated junipers that are throughout my garden. I love a juniper because they are truly tough, drought tolerant shrubs. I feel like what it suffers from, this blue rug juniper, is like maybe a branding issue. Because if tomorrow you dug up some blue rug junipers and you put it in a pot and, I don't know, named it like topaz icicle, people would just run to it and be like, this is such a cool choice conifer. It's a specialty conifer. And it's literally a blue rug juniper. And I would succumb to that marketing campaign because I would be like, oh, I just got Hey, Carol, I just got blue topaz icicle juniper. It's amazing. And it's really blue rug juniper. But I think it just suffered. It was a product of its own success and its own ubiquity that it's just not, I just can't. Blue rug juniper.
It's the John Denver effect, right? poor blue rug juniper.
Right. Poor John Denver of junipers. And now, because everything sounds better with a British accent, here's Peter to talk about American things he should like, but just doesn't.
Bravo, Carol and Danielle. This is an episode topic I thoroughly enjoyed. Up to this point, we've done approximately 115 episodes about plants you can't get enough of. So to hear about plants that you simply do not love was refreshing indeed. And I can definitely relate. There are so many American things I should like, but I just don't. For instance, after this latest heat wave, you'll think I would love the fact that so many American homes are outfitted with some sort of air conditioning unit. Never mind the temperature, the fact that these little boxes eliminate humidity too. Brilliant, right? Wrong. I feel as though we've all become a little less hardy, to use a plant term, thanks to AC. True, temperatures are rising, but having to sleep in a 69-degree icebox and wake with a dry throat every morning is not pleasant, in my opinion. My wife disagrees, of course, but give me the jolly old UK any day, where the idea of climate control depends on exactly how far you crack open the window. Next on my list, of course, is fast food. Yes, we have these types of restaurants in England, but they're generally not as ubiquitous as they are here in the States. The idea of food prepared fast should be something I like, but I don't. And it's not the quality of these meals that bothers me either. It's just the fact that I don't feel that an entire 3-course dinner should be made in under 3 minutes. There should be a ceremony, a refinement in meal preparation, like watching the perfect cup of tea steep. Danielle swears I'd change my mind if I simply gave a McDonald's hash brown a try, but I seriously doubt it. And finally, root beer. It's not a root or a beer. Although I know why many find the sugary substance delightful, if it looks like Guinness and has beer in its name, then it bloody well should have alcohol in it. Enough said.
I mean, I'm not a huge fast food fan, but the McDonald's breakfast biscuit is delicious. I don't know what Peter is talking about. I think he's lost his mind. I think he has.
He might be overthinking it.
I think he is too. Well, let's see what our expert overthought as far as plants that he should like but doesn't.
Hello, this is Dr. Andy Pulte from the University of Tennessee and also one of your contributing editors to Fine Gardening magazine. And I'm glad to join you today to talk about plants that I probably should like, but I actually don't. And a few did come to mind when I got that topic sent to me. But first, I want you to know I'm not really a houseplant person. And the houseplant people are the ones who probably have the strongest opinion on this. And in fact, if you Googled plants that I dislike or plants that I hate in YouTube, that's what it's going to be, videos of houseplant people talking about all the houseplants that they dislike. But I'm also not really a vegetable gardener at my home. I do have a small vegetable garden, So we're not going to be talking about vegetable plants either, even though I do have some strong opinions on zucchini, and some of you probably do as well. We're going to be talking mostly about ornamental plants today as I run through my list of those plants that I probably should like, but I actually don't. And the first one that came to my mind is Shasta daisy. I really dislike Shasta daisies just in general. I don't like them in the garden. I think they're hard to design with. White is kind of hard to design with just in general. And I haven't had that great of experience with them. I live in Zone 7. I garden in Zone 7, which I know that's really pushing up against the heat hardiness zones for Shasta daisies. They're hardy from zones 3 through 8. So as you move up towards the top of that spectrum, Shasta daisies are not going to be as good for you. I probably should like them. They were named after, they were hybridized, by Luther Burbank in the 1890s, who's really one of the great plants people the world has ever known. And he had brought so many great plants into cultivation, and really we owe a debt to him. And then also, the most popular cultivar of Shasta daisy is Becky, and that's my wife's name, so I guess I should probably like Becky Shasta daisies, but I just cannot bring myself to like them. And one of the main reasons is they don't bury their dead. They don't self-clean. And what I mean by that is that the new flowers are all mixed up with old flowers, and you really do have to go in there and deadhead Shasta daisies to keep them blooming, to make them look nice. And you really just have to do that to make a Shasta daisy look good. And that white bloom, after it fades, looks like some sort of brown paper bag in the garden, and I just dislike it. Now, I did go and visit the Chicago Botanic Gardens trials of Shasta daisies last year, and there was one that I almost piqued my interest. It's called Coconut, and it really does bury its dead just a little bit. That coconut cultivar, it's actually a frilly double cultivar, frilly as in the flowers are frilly, and the new flowers actually are produced higher up than the old flowers, and so it covers up some of those old flowers. So that one is not too bad, and maybe I would recommend that one. But maybe in cooler climates than I garden in, Shasta daisy would be a little bit better, and I'm sure there's some Shasta daisy lovers out there, but it's not for me. The second one I thought of is a plant hardy from zones 5 through 9. It's a big, almost like a shrub, small tree, and that's Rose of Sharon, Hibiscus syricus. I dislike this plant for many reasons, but one of the reasons is I find it looks a little bit artificial in the garden. The leaves are dark green and waxy, which sounds good, but it is a plant that, in my mind, does not deserve specimen status, even though it's got a lot of blooms. It blooms its head off in a lot of cases. If you're not familiar with it, this is a hibiscus relative, of course. It has hibiscus-like flowers, but they are far from the show that you get from a hardy hibiscus, that you would grow a hardy hybrid hibiscus or a tropical hibiscus. They're not going to be like that. They can cover the shrub from top to bottom, but to me, it just looks out of place in the garden. The foliage looks plastic. There are a few cultivars that I can tolerate in the garden, and one is called Poly Petite, and that's because the flower color is a salmony pink that is really, maybe it has a little bit of purple on it as I think about it, but that one is a pretty good one. It's a shorter cultivar. And there's another one called Little Kim, Lilkim, Little Kim, which is another shorter one, which has smaller flowers. And that one does really get covered head to toe. It's a smaller plant, smaller flowers, and it gets covered head to toe in flowers. But Rose of Sharon are stiff, plasticky, and just are sometimes out of place looking in the landscape, especially when you bring them towards the front of the border. I would say I would reserve Rose of Sharon, this hibiscus, to the background of the border. Plant a big one. Plant one that gets big, but can stay in the background of your landscape where you can get a little bit of color pops. But this is a plant that I don't often think of adding to the landscape. Maybe it's because it's hard to place. But I think that there's better plants that you can plant other than a Rose of Sharon. Not to mention, even though there are some semi-sterile cultivars, it does seed around for me in Zone 7 quite a bit. I don't know Maybe some people can make some comments about if this plant seeds around for them. But in particular, some of the old-fashioned cultivars are known to be quite weedy in the garden, and you don't need a shrub that produces 100 new baby shrubs every year. So that one is definitely on my list. But last, I wanted to talk about the very first plant that came to my mind, and the one that's probably the most popular plant that I'm going to talk about, and that's daylilies. Daylilies is probably a plant that I probably should like. And in fact, this year I even went to a daylily festival near my hometown, and I just found myself completely underwhelmed, even though I was looking at thousands of different cultivars of plants. And just so you know, there are 96,000 registered cultivars of daylilies. 96,000 plus. There's probably 10 since I recorded this that have been added to the list, or 50 daylilies that have been added to the list of registered cultivars of daylilies. And they are, of course, tough plants in the landscape. And they are plants that you can move around the garden. You can pull one up. You can leave the plant on your driveway for 3 days and plant it back in the ground, and it's probably going to be fine. They're low maintenance plants. They provide a utility in the landscape. But man, they just do nothing for me. And just so you know, they're not even lilies anymore. They're actually been moved to this whole other family. They used to be in the Liliaceae family, and now they're in this whole other family, Xanthorrhoeanaceae, or Xanthorrhoeanaceae, which means the golden resin flowers, and it's been lumped in now with other things like nymphophea, aloes, and so that's been completely moved out of the lily family. And where I really kind of get upset sometimes when I, talk to people who are daylily enthusiasts, and I watch them on social media, and they'll post a picture of a daylily that is, outstandingly beautiful, and it'll be a zoomed in photo, and then I'll actually see that daylily in person, and it'll be the size of a silver dollar, where I was expecting it to be, 6 or 8 inches across. It's just the size of a silver dollar. It's this little tiny thing. It's got beautiful attributes, but it's just too tiny. And so there are great daylily cultivars. There are a lot of great friends of mine who breed daylilies and love daylilies, and they have terminology of their own. They like chicken fat on their daylilies. That's where the edges are crinkly. They like their eyes to be different colors, and they've all got their own opinions about daylilies. It's a great utility plant. I use it mixed in with daffodils in the landscape sometimes when I can. I have daylilies at my house, but I'm going to tell you the truth. They do nothing for me. Well, thanks for listening to this little rant about plants that I probably should like, but I don't. And thank you for listening to this podcast and subscribing to this podcast, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
I was really anxious to see if Andy Pulte could pull this off, because I swear I thought that man had never met a plant he didn't like.
Well, we can't like them all the same, right?
No.
Right.
It's true.
It's possible.